Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones, and I am the chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance. Today we are joined behind the camera by our all-volunteer crew from Greater Lawrence Technical School. We have Joshua Robles, Victor Lopez, and Jane Ramirez, and Susan Martin of North Andover CAM. Our guest today is District Director Rick Jakious from Congressman Moulton's office. Welcome.
Phyllis, thanks so much for having me here.
No, thank you. It's a world of wonders out there, so thank you for showing up.
It's an important topic, so.
Now, you know, a lot of people know a lot of different issues that the Congressman supports. I know the biggest one people know about is military, because of his background. But I was kind of surprised when I was looking through the different programs that we'll talk about that the Congressman supports. Is there any personal connection that he has as to why, you know, helping people who are considered disabled are such a important topic?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, this is an issue that is universally important, but certainly a couple of personal experiences kind of drive Seth's investment in this topic in particular. The first is that he grew up with an uncle with Down syndrome. And, you know, as was often the case in those days, and perhaps still, his uncle worked at the grocery store, bagging groceries. And he always knew his uncle, he loved his uncle. His uncle, when he passed away, Seth went to his funeral, and Seth was blown away that the entire town had turned out, because his uncle had been something of sort of the unofficial mayor. You know, everyone went through, you know, it was a small town, everyone went through the grocery store, everyone knew him, and so everyone turned out to sort of celebrate his life and that bit of happiness that he had brought to them. And so that's a big piece of it, but obviously the second is his military experience. As you well know, many of our veterans are dealing with physical and intellectual disabilities directly connected to their time in service, traumatic brain injury, loss of limbs, and so this is an issue of incredible importance to the veterans community as well.
No, my father-in-law served post-World War II. He was a POW in Korea, 2 tours of duty in Nam. He was in Panama during the uprisings. So we saw firsthand after he, you know, I didn't meet them until after, you know, he had retired from the military, but we saw firsthand what that did to him, you know, and not in just physical, but also cognitively, you know, how that affected him over the years.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I completely respect that and why he does that, but I also respect that he has a personal family connection to all of this, so it gives more than just lip service to the situation. Now let's talk overall. People have problems navigating Medicare, Medicaid, SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance for people who may not know the acronyms, Department of Education. How can you help them navigate that stuff, especially if they're considered disabled?
Yeah, absolutely. And many people don't know that their congressman's office is someone they can turn to with help on things like that. So Seth represents a 6th congressional district. That's 39 cities and towns comprised of the bulk of Essex County and a handful of communities in Middlesex County. And we have 2 offices, one in DC and one in Salem, that work very closely with one another, but that serve 2 very different and distinct purposes. Our DC office focuses on policy and legislation, and our district office focuses on supporting the individuals and communities here in our congressional district. And so that means a big part of that is helping constituents navigate individual issues that they're dealing with federal agencies, whether it's the Department of Veterans Affairs, Social Security, as you said, Medicare, the IRS. Last 2 years alone, we worked with over 2,000 constituents. We returned over $1.4 million in monetary benefits alone to our constituents, but it's more than just the money. You know, one individual just, you know, we worked with a gentleman who was homebound and was having trouble getting his motorized wheelchair through Medicare. He was unable to go visit his family. He was unable to make medical appointments. We were able to help cut through the red tape and get him that wheelchair. And those are the kinds of things we can do for constituents across the district.
That's a huge thing, because if you're, you know, your self-esteem is down because you know, and you feel like you're on an island by yourself, to be able to know that you can reach out to somebody. And a lot of times people don't know, well, do I reach out to my mayor? Do I reach out to my town government? Do I reach out to my state rep? Do I reach out to my congressman? And I assume if somebody calls you with a question that's more state or local generated, you'll help guide them in terms of who they should
Absolutely.
fall back on,
The
for
key
lack
is
of a better term?
the key is just reach out. We have an incredible relationship with our state and local government, and we consistently receive referrals from them, and we'll refer people back to them. So people shouldn't be worried about knowing, geez, is this a local government, state government, federal government issue? The key is if you're having these problems, reach out, and any one of us can help get you to the right place, and we work
You'll
together
funnel them
really well.
to where they need to go.
Absolutely.
One of the things as I was looking at everything that you folks are doing that really caught my eye is the Aspire program.
Yeah, absolutely.
I interned in the Senate back in 1999. We won't date ourselves there.
Indeed. My gray hair dates me enough.
Don't even get me started. But I mean, back in those days, top-notch grades, top-notch everything. To even have a hint of a congressional or a senatorial internship in school, let alone the White House.
Yeah.
Those were kind of coveted, very difficult. If you weren't the top of your class at something or didn't stand out somewhere, you weren't getting in.
Yeah.
But you have this Aspire program that you participate in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most importantly for us, it's important to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yes.
We'll talk about some of the legislation and policy in a little bit. But let me talk first about kind of our commitment in terms of our staff and our interns. We have had several staff members and interns who are veterans with service-connected disabilities. We're one of the only offices in Capitol, congressional offices, that have people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in both their DC offices and their district offices. In our district office in Salem, we partner with MGH's Aspire program, which places individuals who are on the autism spectrum in internships to help them build their resume and their work experience for future career opportunities. And so the nature of our work, it's a lot of dealing with constituents on the phones, it's a lot of research. We tend to work with folks who are on the kind of highest functioning end of the autism spectrum, but it's important for us to have a commitment to that. You're absolutely right. Congressional internships are incredibly competitive, but there's a value in diversity on your team, and diversity of experience and diversity of who you are, and that includes diversity of abilities. And so we actively seek out those opportunities. We're incredibly excited to have a young man joining us this summer who has cerebral palsy, and he's going to be helping to work with some of and advocate about a piece of legislation we'll talk about in a little bit with some of our constituent stakeholder groups. This will be a new experience for us. We're really excited, but having that diversity of experience and ability across all spectrums is really critical to understanding and being responsive to the needs of our constituents.
No, and that is because, too many people, too many times they'll sit back and say, I can't because. And maybe it was like that 20, 25 years ago, but you're showing us, don't say I can't because you can, and we'll make sure you have a platform to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Don't be turned off just because. And a lot of what you're doing really goes to a part of the community that's considered disabled that a lot of people forget, and that's people with cognitive disabilities.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can always see. So if you can't see it, it may not be there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so because of that, I think that some of this stuff is fantastic. HR 6611, the Heads Up Act.
Yep.
It expands and improves healthcare services for those with a developmental disability.
Yes.
Now, the junkie that I am, I took the act, I took the statute, went back and forth, but
that's impressive.
I told you I was a junkie. It helps people who are, who have severe and chronic disability. There's severe and chronic, mental or physical impairment or combination. It has to be manifested before they're 22, so that so that it's done before the children are cycled out of the childhood aspect and into the adult aspect of things. And it has to have a substantial functional limit on 3 or more: self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. And it needs to be lifelong or for an extended duration. Now, I understand what all of that means. I told you I'm a junkie, and I warned your office about that. Can you kind of break it down a little bit so that people can understand it a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about this piece of legislation, and are actually, I believe, reintroducing it next week. It's, you know, the colloquial name is the Heads Up Act.
Okay.
And it is supported by a broad cross-spectrum of advocates in the disability space, as well as medical professionals and even insurance companies and medical providers. And what it does is it takes the federal government has something known as medically disadvantaged populations. Yes. The vast majority of those are geographically constrained. So the idea is if you don't have access to a primary care doctor or specialist, then your medical outcomes are going to be significantly lower than the general population. And so most medically disadvantaged populations are geographically constrained. You think of like extremely rural areas where there aren't a lot of doctors. Yeah. There is a special designation, however, for specially designated medically disadvantaged populations that looks at populations that are across geographic spectrum, but that also have medical outcomes that are demonstrably lower than the general population. So a perfect example of this in one of the specially designated populations is the homeless population.
Yes.
Every community will have homeless individuals, and we know that they are not getting the medical care they deserve and need.
They're almost forgotten.
Absolutely. And so that designation comes with additional funding, federal funding, resources, and the ability of communities to address the needs of those populations. So what Heads Up does is actually creates a special medically disadvantaged population designation for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, because the research shows that the medical outcomes for these individuals is much lower than the general population. It's incredibly difficult to find a doctor that has the specialty and the understanding and is able to deal with this population. And as a result, you see the medical deliverables are much lower for this population than anyone else. So this would create that designation. You know, that's kind of the semi-wonky version of it. But at the end of the day, it means that additional resources and funding would be available to help support these communities.
Now, and you said that it was, it's something that's backed by including others insurance companies?
Yeah, I mean,
that's not something you hear of every day.
Yeah, I mean, everyone understands that to get to these populations and to treat them appropriately, it costs money and it costs resources. And so we have a broad cross spectrum of people who have skin in the game, yeah, or some amount of responsibility towards delivering to these individuals, have all come together to really rally around this idea that, you know, we need to focus on bringing up the medical outcomes of these folks.
And you know, it doesn't matter what sort of medical issue you're talking about. Everybody always says, you know, the sooner you can catch it,
yeah,
the sooner you can get your hands
prevention
on it.
Is key.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if people get the medical care that they need, you know, that's going to help them as they get older and later on in life.
It decreases hospital visits and emergency room visits and situations that could become chronic or incredibly expensive. And so across the spectrum in our medical industry, if we can address things at the root and we can take a preventative approach, that ultimately it's not just the morally right thing to do, it's the economically correct thing for us to do.
Now you mentioned helping the homeless population. I mean, so I work in Boston, and you know, I walk past people all the time, and you know, I hate to admit they're almost a forgotten population.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you help them and help the people who aren't homeless at the same time, yeah, and get this all done and make sure that, yeah, you know, how does this?
Well, what is interesting is there is. I think it's safe to say there's incredible crossover between those two populations.
Yes.
You know, when you look at our homeless population, you see a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. You know, choices we made about how we dealt with mental illness over the last couple of decades, yes, have really led to a lot of those folks ending up homeless. And so there's a significant crossover here between those two populations. What this would do is basically say not all individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities or homeless, but they deserve the same kind of resources. This would authorize that. This would basically allow for us, it would allow for us to invest those in additional resources. We'll have to continue to fight to make sure then that the funding is backed behind that. And that's key next step is ensuring that the time and energy and money that's needed to do this is invested in it.
No, that's fantastic because, I mean, we're lucky here in the greater Boston area. We've got some of the most renowned hospitals worldwide, but there are other parts of the country that aren't, but you get out further than 495 and you get, lesser and lesser, the further you get from Boston. So no, this is great.
Well, we have an incredible nonprofit social safety net as well. That was my background before coming to work for Seth. I ran a statewide nonprofit advocacy organization. And so as we have seen over the last couple of decades, government funding decrease, we've actually seen nonprofit social service agencies kind of step up and fill some of those goals, those holes in the social safety net. But that can't go on, that is not a problem. That is not a solution to the longer term problem. We need to get serious about funding our social safety net and the most vulnerable people amongst us.
Yes, because we've had guests on this program from programs like Triangle, that they do exactly what the government isn't doing.
Yep.
So you would then be really helping them with their work. And you'd be building a symbiotic relationship in order to get done what needs to be getting done.
Definitely. So. The pressing problems, the sort of historically chronic, challenging social problems that we face are not going to be solved individually by government or by nonprofits or the private sector. It's ultimately going to be a combination of the three that's needed to do that.
And that's fantastic. So that people who either care for somebody who is considered disabled and especially with the cognitive disabilities, or who is, but they can care for themselves to some degree, they can reach out to the Congressman's office and you can help direct them in the right direction to be able to determine what services they might be able to receive and where they can receive them and how best to get them to those services.
Yes, absolutely.
And that.
Can I give our phone number?
You can give that at the end of
the. Okay, good.
When we give out the Facebook page and the phone number, and we'll have that. Trust me, we'll make sure that people know how to get in touch with you. And there's something new coming up called the Capability Act.
Yeah. The Capability Act is another piece of legislation that we're reintroducing. We introduced it in the last Congress, but it was sort of the tail end of Congress. And as you know, you're in a 2-year cycle, and any legislation that doesn't pass, you kind of start over at square one.
Yeah,
so
for us political hackies, we call that dying in committee.
Yes. So this bill died. We introduced it a little late, but we're really excited about it, and so we're reintroducing it now. And what this does is creates a pilot demonstration program in 6 states that would focus on providing the resources necessary to provide competitive, integrated employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Now, the people who do the work in the space know exactly what that means. Yep. The layperson watching may not. So competitive integrated employment really means 2 things. Competitive means that we're paying people a competitive wage. They're receiving minimum wage to do this job.
Which isn't necessarily enough to even live.
Which definitely isn't, but it's a huge step up for from the $2 an hour or what that some employers are paying. And so there's generally a consensus, certainly amongst the stakeholders in this community, that we ought to be focusing on providing someone a competitive wage that is comparable to what we would be paying anyone else to do that work. Work is work, right? Yeah. So you should if you're going to pay this person here to do it, you should be paying the same amount for this individual regardless of whether they have a cognitive disability.
Or physical or whatever, yeah.
Absolutely. The second part is the integrated part, and that's another part where I think there is, has changed over time, but an emerging consensus amongst the people working in the field of people with disabilities that these individuals should be integrated into our community. In the same ways kind of we think about and focus on our office. Like, it's important to have people of different abilities working side by side. We have a richer community because of it. Yes. And there's actually studies that have shown that when you train someone with an intellectual or developmental disability to do a role, they are incredibly loyal individuals. And when they're good at it, they love it, they do it, and you're training someone for a career. And show me an employer who doesn't want to have a type of employee who they can train once and then know they're going to show up and do the job and be excited about it and be there for the long haul. I mean, every employer wants someone like that. So integration is not just about doing something nice or what's sort of right. There is also a real business advantage to it as well. And so integration is key to that as well. So the Capabilities Act provides a pilot program that would grow to 6 states that would fund efforts around creating competitive integrated employment for people with IDD.
Now, just so everybody's aware, we don't know at this point what states would be.
We do not.
And how those states would be picked.
Yep.
And
we'll push hard to make sure one of them is Massachusetts.
I was going to say, come on, you got to take care of your home base.
Yes.
You got to take care of your home base. So, that's something that actually could be fantastic for regardless.
Absolutely.
But then, if you don't get Massachusetts in the first round, maybe the second round.
Certainly. Our first piece of legislation was a pilot program with the Department of Veteran Affairs to allow veterans to schedule and change and make their appointments on their smartphones. The idea that this day and age, everybody can sort of do this, and
most everybody
most everybody could do this, and so we were successful. That was our first successful piece of legislation. The pilot program exists, and one of the first sites was the Bedford VA Hospital here in our district. So hopefully, we'll have the same sort of luck
let history
with this.
repeat itself.
Exactly.
Now, there are a bunch of other pieces, that sounds really professional. There are a lot of other pieces of legislation that I understand the Congressman has signed on to. Autism Cares Act, Transformation of Competitive Employment Act, Disability Integration Act, Disabled Access Credit Expansion Act, the Improving Access to Higher Education Act of 2017, and the Able Financial Planning Act. Wow. And Able to Work Act.
I'd be lying if I told you I could catalog every single one of those.
I looked at it and I'm like, there's no way I can understand all of this in one sitting.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Seth's not the only member of Congress working in this space. There's other members with good ideas, and when that's the case, then we sign on as co-sponsors of those pieces of legislation. So there are about 12 pieces of legislation coming out of the last Congress, and that I assume we will continue to sponsor going into this Congress. That address issues for people with disabilities that we support. And they all tend to focus on kind of economic empowerment and dignity and opportunity for people with intellectual disabilities, supporting others around them to make it so that we can have opportunities for those individuals. So there's tax credits for businesses to make sure that they're compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, something that can be economically challenging for some business owners or building owners. There's a bill in there that funds additional NIH and other agency research around autism and identification and supports. And so we really look, we try to look on any issue. What are the pieces of legislation? Where are there holes where we can identify and create legislation like Capability or the Heads Up Act? And where is there great things that other members that are doing, both Republican and Democrat, that we can sign on as co-sponsors and really support?
To fill in those gaps?
Absolutely.
So that people who are often forgotten are not forgotten.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
And again, the thing I really want to bring you back to, because a lot of people get scared of, ooh, how do I find out this information? And they're not going to want to talk to me, and not everybody's like me who can pick up a phone and say, get me the boss. Everybody is different. For the person who's hesitant to call you, what would you say?
Don't be. We run, like I said, my background is in nonprofit, and when we were getting this office up and off the ground. Seth said, I want to do things a little differently than every other politician. And I really want our district office to be something that is rolling up its sleeves and tackling problems and helping people. So we run our office like a small social service agency. We're really proud of that fact. Our casework team is incredible. And as I said, it's worked with over 2,000 people in the last 2 years, has had some incredible success in helping people navigate federal government. And even if we can't solve the problem, sometimes we can't, a lot of times we can't. They're very good at helping people understand the why behind it and cutting through some of the jargon that you sometimes hear, bureaucratic jargon and morass.
Sort of like the way I was explaining,
that
yeah.
intimidates people. So I'd say just reach out to us. If you don't want to pick up the phone, then email us, but certainly reach out.
And you're there.
Yep.
People shouldn't be afraid to reach out to you.
Never.
And if you can't help them because it's a different level of government, you'll hold their hand and get them to where they need to be.
Definitely.
Well, I'd like to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for joining us on Ability Assistance. We got a little problem with the teleprompter here, technical difficulties. But we're waiting for the teleprompter to be fixed. Let me ask you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, 2 ways in particular. First, call our office, 978-531-1669.
Okay.
And the other way is through email. You can email seth.moulton, MOULTON, @mail.house.gov. Either one of those 2 will get routed to the appropriate staff member, and we'll be certain to help them as best we can.
On average,
how
long does it take somebody to get back to you?
It's a great question. So we receive about 150,000 emails and pieces of mail annually. We post on our website our average response time. Now, typically that's for people who are, so I think right now, last time I checked, we were at roughly 6 days. So connecting somebody who's having a problem to a staff member happens generally very quickly, a matter of a day or 2 at most. If you're calling to ask about a specific issue or policy issue, if it's something we've dealt with before and have already done the research and already have a position, then we can get back to you very quickly. If it's a new issue, sometimes those take quite a bit longer to respond to, but we're averaging 6 days across those 150,000 emails and pieces of physical mail. If you call the office, we try and have the appropriate staff member respond within 24 hours.
That's fantastic. Because people don't expect, they want this quick turnaround, but they don't expect they're going to get it. So again, thank you, Rick, for joining us. You are the District Director for Congressman Moulton's office. And as always, our all-volunteer crew from Greater Lawrence Technical School. We have Joshua Robles, Victor Lopez, and Jaden Ramirez. And we have Susan Martin and Brian Frazier of North Andover CAM here as well. And everyone at the commission wants to wish a special congratulations to 2 of our students from GLTS who've been volunteering with us most, if not all, of the school year, Joshua and Victor, as well as Jaden, who is a new person for us on our crew. And they're all graduating from Greater Lawrence Technical School and moving on to college in the fall. We've been honored to have you volunteer with us. We couldn't have done it without them. Mazel tov, gentlemen. You really made this program come to life, and that has helped us. And again, Rick, if you want to give out your phone number again.
Sure, absolutely. It's the office of Congressman Seth Moulton, and our phone number is 978-531-1669.
And you can always reach the commission by calling Town Hall. We also have a Facebook page. And that is, might help if I knew my own Facebook page. On Facebook, we are Commission on Disability Issues with an S, NAND, which is like North Andover, NAND. We'll be rolling out all of our past episodes and our future episodes on a podcast coming soon, so wait for that one.
I look forward to it.
Podcasts are the wave of the future. Nobody watches TV anymore. Everything is on podcasts. You can also call us at Town Hall at 978 888-688-9500. And sort of like with the Congressman's office, if you have any questions, if you're concerned about how to navigate anything, call. The town will get in touch with me. My email address is also posted on the town's webpage. You can email me, and we'll point you in the right direction. If the town can't help you, we'll send you to the State House, or we'll send you to the Congressman's office to make sure that you get what you need in order to make sure that you're navigating the system properly. We will be back in September with all new episodes, so stick around, and until then, have a great rest of your spring and summer. Take care.